Howdy, howdy. We are live on another Friday night, and that means it is time for the live Tex-Trek show where we will be talking about this week's episode of Star Trek. We have a brand new season 3 of Lower Decks episode to discuss, and I'm joined by my great friend Starfleet Boy. Starfleet Boy, how are you doing this evening?
I'm really good, and I'm so happy to see that Joel in the audience has calculated how many new subscribers a month we need in order to get Faith of the Heart to
Oh,
happen.
oh
So,
no. Y'all are
yeah,
gonna send me to 1,000 subscribers. Huh? But we'll talk about that in a minute. But yeah, we got a lot to cover. It's a pretty eventful episode. I've seen some mixed opinions on it. Some people thought it was middle of the road. Some people liked it quite a bit more. But I'm curious to trade notes with you and see where we land on it. So let's just go ahead and get the show started.
All right, my notes are not for trade. They cost a lot of money. No, I'm just kidding.
I'm Fathery,
I'm Starfleet Boy.
and this is Tex-Trek.
Engage.
Welcome back aboard the Starship Texas for the 207th installment of the Tex-Trek podcast, the home of Star Trek fandom from deep in the heart of Texas, where we take a deep look at Star Trek, old and new. And tonight we are talking about Star Trek Lower Deck Season 3, Episode 3, Mining the Mind's Mines, written by Brian D. Bradley, directed by Phil Marc Sagadraca. Let me try that one again. Directed by Phil Marc Sagadraca. I'm still sure I got that wrong, but I think I got the name of the episode wrong too. So
It's
already
a good
starting off
name.
the show on a great note.
Mining the mind's minds. Mining the
Yes.
mind's minds.
Yeah, it's a tongue twister. Try saying that 5 times fast.
Mining the mind's I can't do it even once. There you go.
Yeah, that's kind of like a troll episode title. Like people are gonna have a hard time both remembering and saying this. So.
Yeah, it's true.
Um, But I'm so happy to be talking to you in front of our live audience, as well as the people that are listening later. And just a special thank you to everyone who has supported Tex-Trek along the way and has participated in our live shows. And we're trying to get the YouTube subscribers up to 1,000. I've promised that if y'all do it, I will make a music video of me singing my least favorite song of all time. That is Star Trek Enterprise's "Faith of the Heart." So I'm willing to do that if we hit it before the end of the year. But I promise I will never ever do that if we don't make that deadline, because I actually don't
Wow,
really
never
want to do it.
ever.
And I'm kind of
Never
hoping.
ever.
I mean, I really want to hit 1,000 subscribers. I'm kind of hoping like we get really close, but then like don't do it until after the new year, and that way I don't have to sing that song that I hate. So, but yeah, I think we're getting closer. We're over 900 now, so it's up to y'all. But if
Make
you
it
really want to go
so.
the extra mile and help us out, you can also not just subscribe on YouTube, but join the Tex-Trek Patreon. There's various different tiers. There's different perks. You can come in as little as $2 a month, and that will get you into our episode watch-alongs. We got one of those planned very soon, September 17th. That's going to be like next Saturday. So we're going to be watching the Next Generation episode, A Fistful of Data. So if you want to watch that with us and chat with us while we're watching, we're going to do that over in the Tex-Trek Discord. And special thank you to our current patrons, you Starfleet Boy, but also Cake is Eternal, Gay Clevin Lundstrom, Crazy Dutchy, Joanne Robertson, Quark Spar, and our anonymous supporters. Thank all of you so much. I hope I see all of y'all at the watch along we're going to be doing on September 17th. But with all of that out of the way, I should also mention that there was a bunch of Star Trek news came out yesterday at Star Trek Day. We went through all of that in a YouTube live stream. So if you're listening to the podcast, if you're not someone who checks out the YouTube, this is the reason why you should subscribe to the YouTube, because then you can catch the breaking news coverage that we do that, we don't have time to do on the podcast, talking about like all these new episodes every week. But you can go check out our reactions, our recap, analysis, breakdown. We go over trailers, clips, everything that happened at Star Trek Day, weird DJ performances, and awkward stand-up comedy routine that we suspect might have been rewritten last minute. So, but yeah, you can check all of that out on the channel and give us a subscribe, and that will help us out. And yeah, we'll go over all that, Picard trailer, Prodigy clip, all of that stuff. So, go check that out if that sounds interesting to you. Otherwise, though, I think I'm ready to talk about mining the mines or whatever.
Yeah. We got some comments in the audience. It looks like Dom's here, who I had the privilege and pleasure to stream with on Star Trek Day over on
he's our
Trek Central. Yep.
He's our Trek Central shipmate, right?
Yeah, and he's like, I mean, I consider Dom an expert, so I don't know if
Yes.
he wants me to be giving him titles like that, but yeah, he's really cool to stream with. It was fun. We were having a great time yesterday. Thank you to everyone, because you got some folks in your audience that were there as well. So thanks for everyone who showed up for that. That was fun.
I'm just gonna recap the episode real quick by reading the official synopsis, and then I'll kind of expand on that with spoilers. But the official synopsis reads: on a remote science outpost, stone orbs are bringing fantasies to life. Tendi starts her first day as Senior Science Officer Trainee. So yeah, there's this whole conspiracy between the rock people and the scientists to use these orbs to learn Starfleet secrets, but that is uncovered by our lower deckers, and in part by Tendi becoming a great science officer through her through guidance she receives from her mentor, which isn't the mentor she was assigned. But we'll talk about all that. So Hal, I just want to go over like my broad impressions of the episode, and then I'll kind of ask for your take, and then we'll get into the nitty gritty details in the episode breakdown. But just for our opening thoughts on the episode, it's hard for me to pin down exactly why this episode worked so well for me, but I had an especially great time with it. And I typically have a good time with lower decks, but for some reason, just especially this week, right off the bat at the beginning with that cold open, it really grabbed me almost immediately. I started watching this episode when I was kind of tired at night, and then I saw that opening with the seventh grade geology teacher, and all of a sudden I was like, whoa, yeah, that's kind of an enticing opening. This is fun. What's going to happen next? And then I loved how there was a whole Star Trek episode that we didn't see, but this whole episode takes place during the opening title sequence where all like the big stuff happens with the hood, and so it really felt like they're leaning into that second contact premise that the show is supposed to be based on. And the idea of the Cerritos lower deckers, our main cast with Mariner, Boimler, Tendi, Rutherford, that they started out in the beginning of the show. They were like us, they're fans of Star Trek. They're fans of all the other Star Trek characters. They're fans of people that were on the original series and Next Generation and DS9 and Voyager and whatever. But now, as we've started to become fans of these characters, and these are, for a certain group, this is one of our favorite shows, and these are some of our favorite Star Trek characters, and that's reflected in universe, that there's people on other ships that have heard these stories and are looking up to these people. And I just loved how that echoed real life. And also it shows the growth and development in these people, and we're following them along their Starfleet journey. So that made me really happy. The end of the episode put a big smile on my face, and of course seeing Tendi on her science officer arc and getting into that. And if you might recall, last week I was saying I really need to know the status of Mariner and Jennifer, and we got that now. So yeah, a bunch of stuff that really worked for me. But what about you?
Well, I agree with everything that you said, but yeah, there was something really special about this episode. I enjoyed it the most of the season so far. I was just cracking up. I too, Fathery, saw it like I was gonna wait till the morning. Like I feel like watching it early in the morning is better because I'm more fresh, in my head and everything. But I don't know. I was having like an insomnia type of situation. I happened to be up at like 2 in the morning or 2:30 in the morning. It drops early sometimes. and it was on, and I was like in a, like in that kind of feverish dream state. Like I call it a fever dream, and that's what this episode felt like. Those fantasies are so funny and wild, like, and crazy, like, and yeah, the story is just so good. Like, I too found the thing with the Hood and Captain Murakami, and like, just like that's the thing. That's one of these things, like, I found it really, really fun that they put that in there, and that's one of the things about Lower Decks. Like, it's delightful in the way that it subverts your expectations. Like, this was a really neat kind of, they love to do this kind of like device where it's like, oh, you think that people are going to react a certain way, and the setup was well done and well written, because they were like, the people from the Carlsbad crew were kind of like, oh yeah, we know how the Cerritos is, but they meant like they
Hmm.
thought the Cerritos is like awesome, but the way it sounded, they had a chip on their shoulder because they were trying to prove themselves,
Yeah,
but it
it's
sounded
like
like they were
we know
like,
you guys are big badasses. Like, don't worry, we can keep up with you.
yeah,
But
like
it
that
didn't
kind
it
of a
didn't read
tone.
that way. Yeah.
Yeah, it did. Yeah, and so, and of course, none of the characters took it that way either. Like our Cerritos crew. So it's so delightful when it like switched around, because that, I feel like if that hasn't happened to someone in their lifetime, I hope it can happen, because it's a delightful situation when you're like, overly like hard on yourself and you think you suck, but then someone's like, you're actually awesome, and you're like, what? Yeah, okay, I guess I am. Like,
Oh,
which is so
I have
cool.
the opposite experience. I always think I'm badass at everything, and then people are like, "No, I actually think you're terrible at this." I was like, "Oh, really? That's
Father,
shocking."
I have the same experience for the same. So it's like, but the other experience is good too. Anyways, yeah, so it was really good. I loved all the layers to it. I liked the Captain Freeman stuff with Captain Mayer. I liked seeing another. I know we've been introduced to this board, but before, but I just loved seeing the Carlsbad had the blue livery, to complement its function, versus how the Cerritos has the yellow livery and stuff like that. And then of course Stevens was hilarious, and I'll end on saying that it was delightful to get a reference to the koala and the Black Mountain in this episode. So that's all I'll say. That was really delightful that
Oh, and
Stevens saw
another
that.
cosmic entity appears in this episode. I'm looking forward to talking about it
Oh
in the
yeah,
Born
that's
Eggs.
right. That's right. Yeah, very exciting references. And then yeah, just one last thing. I guess really what I should end on is just Leah Brahms returning was pretty awesome.
Yeah, if I heard that it was going to happen, I probably would have guessed it'd be in Picard, maybe Prodigy, but
Yeah,
no, it happened in Lower Decks.
it happened in Lower
So,
Decks, exactly.
and on that note, they've had a legacy Star Trek guest star every episode come do a voice, right? Of season 3 so far. We had James Cromwell, we had J.G. Hertzler,
And
and
now we
now we
have
have
Susan Gibbons. Is it Susan Gibbons, right?
Susan Gibbons. Yes.
Yeah.
So are they going to do this in all 10?
I think that seems to be like the direction they're going in. So I feel
I
like,
was
yeah,
kind of wondering last week, and then we got like another one here, and I'm like, I think they might be trying to bring back a cameo for every single episode of the season. Wouldn't that be something?
yeah, I love it. It's very delightful. They handle it so well. So far, every cameo is just the cameos so far have been like wonderful, and it's interesting. None of them have been their real character selves. They've all been like some kind of
A
fabrication,
recording, a video
or yeah,
game, a
like yeah, or like in this case, a hallucination.
rock
So that's
fantasy.
interesting.
It's
That's interesting.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So we'll have to see what happens next week.
Yeah,
But
I'm
yeah,
now wondering who comes back, who comes next week, who's gonna be
I
the
mean,
next
there's
cameo.
plenty of characters to pick from, so there's no shortage of options.
Absolutely.
Let's just start off at the very beginning. The name of this world is Jingus 4. I thought that was kind of funny, but yeah, they open with that what I mentioned, really hooked me at the beginning, but that cold open with Tony, the scientist, seeing the vision of Gina Marino, his 7th grade geology teacher, in the revealing toga. She wanted him to talk about his fan fiction he writes, where he's Speedy McWheels, the race car driver.
How'd you know that? It's so specific too. It's like, but yeah, he
In
gets
our
turned into
live
stone.
audience, Joel, he was pointing out that the glowing green orb. It's very similar to the Lochnar from Heavy Metal, and I didn't make
Mm.
that connection, but yeah, I'm familiar with that, the animated movie Heavy Metal,
Yeah.
um,
Oh, yeah.
the anthology based on the Heavy Metal
Oh my gosh,
comics.
Joel. I haven't seen that movie since I was like early teenager, and
Yeah,
that
but
was a
there's an
long time
evil
ago. Let
green
me just
orb in
say.
it, so that's kind of
That's
important.
right. I
But
just
yeah, I
pulled it
mean,
up, and yeah, it's a dead on. It must be a reference. It has to be a reference. It has the same kind of glow and design. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Go on.
I guess
Sorry.
it's kind of cliche to do the, oh look, it's like my hot teacher, one of my boyhood fantasies, but I thought they put like their own like kind of unique spin on it by having it be like, oh well, he's a geologist, I assume, he's on like a rock planet studying stuff, so it's like, okay, so it kind of ties like his nerddom or like his hyper focus with it being like his geology teacher specifically. But I thought the design of the Scrabble people were cool. So yeah, I don't know. It kind of reminded me like the Man Trap. How like right at the beginning, there's like this. Oh look, this sexy lady, but it's actually a space monster that's gonna kill you. And
Mm.
just it was an enticing opening. I was eager to see what happened next. And then when I got through the opening titles, it's like, oh, this whole adventure has already been resolved and wrapped up. I was like, oh my god, that is so hilarious. That is that is one of the best gags they've had in the show ever.
It's so great. Look at the hood there. It looks so good. Look how many scientists have succumbed to this this like
Yeah,
terrible fate.
there's just like a ton of these rock statues of scientists that have been converted. So yeah, we learn from the log entry from Captain Freeman that the USS Hood showed up, that their captain, remind me, what was his name?
Murakami, Captain Murakami, if I'm gonna
Murakami.
say
Yeah,
yeah.
Captain Murakami. He had initiated a
A
dialogue with
piece.
the Scrubble. They've come to some understanding. It's all been taken care of. And so now that the Hood will leave, and it's up to another California class, the Carlsbad, to do a joint mission with the Cerritos and relocate the scientists, and also clean up the psychic mines or fantasy rocks. And, Ransom goes on a rant about these scientists and how they're so weird and they got
A
to get their
rant.
degrees in studying spores or whatever.
Would you call it a rant? Some.
Well, it's not a stand-up routine because that's a raw, unfiltered. Was it a raw, unfiltered?
It was a dating and mating.
Yeah, dating and mating.
Dating and mating. My goodness, that Stevens goes a little too far here. I think with this whole like obsession of his, and Ransom kind of lets him know. I wonder if they're going to develop this any further.
Yeah, we've seen Steven since the first episode of the show, but they've never really done like a ton of development with him, other than reminding us every now and then that he's kind of a one-sided bromance with Ransom. Like he's like kind of Ransom obsessed, and Ransom's like, yeah, man, you got to
Well,
stop telling people we share a sacred bond. Like that's kind of weird.
they've been like in shenanigans before, like in the season one they had that, like when they came back and they were like chest, they had their like
But
little
they're like
chest
high
butt,
fiving and like,
yeah,
let's go
with
get
their
a
chest
cold beer. It's like
beer,
nothing I
and then
don't like more than a cold brewski with a bro after a smooth first contact or
that's
something like
right.
that.
Or second contact, right? And then the other
Or yeah,
thing
second
was
contact, of course.
the other thing in the episode, of course, the very famous Boimler maneuver episode. Stevens
Oh yeah, I
Ransom are,
excretus.
yeah, they're engaged in some
The,
interesting
it's
activities
naked
together.
time. Oh yeah, when Stevens is like riding Ransom with a riding
Yeah,
crop, and he's like, I don't know
but
where I end and you begin.
so I think like that. I think Ransom and Stevens definitely do have like a kind of bond, but I think Ransom, maybe what I might be seeing here is that Ransom's trying to have like get Mariner to take him seriously, and how can he if he doesn't really have any authority over Stevens? Like Stevens kind of
Stevens is kind of
breaks
undercutting it.
undercutting it the whole time. Yeah, so that's how I think ultimately read it. But it is an interesting piece of tension. I really liked it. I like the way they handled it.
And I like seeing the lower deckers from another ship, and then them having to work together. And um, I guess we do get more Stevens in this episode than any previous episode, because here he's the senior officer in command of the whole operation, commanding both sets of officers. Um, we'll talk about the Tendi story later. They leave poor Tendi on the ship to do her science training, but we focus on the three Carlsbad crew members. I don't think we get a name for the Tellarite, but we have Ensign Kearns and then Zaldin. However you say that alien species, Zaldan. But
I'm not sure, but I know
the
which the
the
web
web hands.
finger.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we'll
yeah, the
talk about where that came from before later.
yeah,
But
and we did some speculating about it in our, or we noticed it at least in our trailer discussion. That was cool
yeah,
to see that this episode. There's a lot from the in the trailer. There's a lot I feel like from this episode.
I mean, there's a lot of interesting visuals, and this is also early in the season, so
Yeah.
it makes sense to mine this for clips to put in the trailer. But yeah, I like I don't know, like the idea of like seeing another version of the Cerritos, another California class, another group of lower deckers. You can kind of imagine like what their relationships are like with each other, like their dynamics, their missions, the type of stories, that you could probably set like a whole Star Trek show on that crew. And
Yeah,
visually
these
interesting, different
characters.
aliens we don't see a ton of.
Yeah, and these characters
Zaldin
were
and a
really
Tellarite.
cool. They were interesting. It's neat. We've seen this a couple times now in Lower Decks, like other crews, and I think that's like a neat thing. Lower Decks seems to do a lot of collabs or crossovers or stuff like that. You know.
Yeah, and it also sets up, I guess, like the competition between them when
Mm-hmm.
Mariner
There she
is
is.
Mariner's wanting to pick up the pace and finish the task of cleaning up the fantasy rocks before the Carlsbad lower deckers finish their task of disassembling the science outpost. I didn't see that misdirect coming, and I've talked about how they do those misdirect jokes so often in lower decks that they've started to become a bit too predictable for me. But
Mm-hmm.
this one, I honestly like was
Yeah.
surprised later in the episode, and it didn't feel forced or too unnatural. It was believable enough that I bought into it, and I was like, oh yeah, that's pretty clever. I like that.
Yeah, it was very charming. Leah Brahms looks so awesome. They even put her in those like onesies that go all the way to your boots, like they're part of your boots or whatever. You know what I'm talking about? Like her shoes
Oh,
just
like the
transform.
the pants and the boots are like
Yeah, they
one
just
piece.
instantly
Yeah, like the motion
transform into
picture
the other.
style.
Yeah, it's so funny that they even that's just what again total big love for the team that makes this show. Just because like little things like that, how many people are gonna remember that? But it's delightful when you do.
Yeah. I'll point out her wardrobe later in the Gornegs, but yeah,
Oh, right on.
the fantasies for these characters, I thought they were all like pretty good and pretty revealing. And yeah, like they do the lower decks thing of like having an Easter egg, having a bringing back something from an older show with Leia Brahms, but it made sense. Oh yeah, Rutherford is such a science nerd that like sexy Leia Brahms who's talking about designing galaxy class engines with her and stuff like that would be his fantasy.
I really
The
love this
the
because when I was like a middle schooler, I remember I was part of like I wasn't good at math, but I was part of like the same group of kids that were in the mathletes or like debate class or like like went to conferences and competed and stuff like that. And a lot of the young women and the young men had like legit had posters of scientists. That they would like, you know what I mean? Like those were their crushes and stuff, our crushes back then. So I feel like that was really apropos for Rutherford and also very charming and just reminded me of some fun nerd quirks.
Yeah, I mean, you could make the criticism that it's almost like too specifically the exact same thing we saw with Geordi, with her kind of being his fantasy woman. But
But she's Leah Brahms is so famous that it's not surprising that both Geordi and Rutherford, and 20 years later or whatever, or however many years later, would have this a similar obsession, I guess.
yeah, I guess this is close to 20 years later. Yeah. the Boimler fantasy of the admirals showing up and telling them, we need you, Boimler. The Borg are attacking, and you got to come with me and be the hero. And even at some point, he's like, "I'll make you a captain." Uh, I thought this was so funny, the dialogue with Mariner, where she's like, "Really, a sidecar? You're not even like the driver in your fantasy?" And Boimler just being like, "Driving is scary. I'm a natural passenger."
I love that. I love Boimler's like little. He's unabashed about his quirks and stuff like that. Joel points out in the audience the little nacelles. They're like the
Yeah,
classic.
the vehicle is ridiculous.
It
It's
is a
very much
ridiculous
based
vehicle.
on the TOS style of the Constitution class with the deflector and the nacelles, but yeah, and then the
It's like those
sidecar.
crazy toys that Spock helmet comes from the same line, I suppose.
Oh yeah, like the
Like
same
yeah,
designers would probably want to slap
probably
this thing.
put
This
the.
actually looks too much like real Star Trek, whereas that Spock helmet was very much like random and off the wall and unrelated. But uh,
What about
but
the
but yeah,
admiral's wearing the same kind of outfit that Admiral Doherty wore in
right.
yeah, right?
In
Like it's
Star Trek
kind of
Insurrection, and then
yeah,
later worn by Admiral Ross on Star Trek Deep
yeah.
Space Nine.
So what's the deal with that? Because it's interesting. Star Trek, modern Star Trek is kind of like, and I know part of this is for sales and stuff like that, like just or getting like a lot of uniforms up there so you could buy them, but or whatever. But Star Trek in this modern era seems to have like a ton of uniforms all over the place. Like I feel like the Hood had the DS9 style uniforms, the Cerritos and the Carlsbad have their California class or whatever you want to call it style uniforms,
Mm-hmm.
and then here's Admiral Ross with a uniform style that I thought wouldn't be around at this time. So
Well,
I
no,
mean,
it would make sense that this would be around during whenever
not
people
Admiral
are wearing
Ross,
the
but you know
black
what I
and
mean.
grays,
I guess so. Yeah,
like on the
maybe.
Hood or the Titan.
So yeah, I guess really it's only the whatever for whatever reason the
Yeah,
California class folks wear a different uniform.
right. Yeah, they're the anomaly, I guess. But yeah, this is only like 2 years after Nemesis, so
Mm,
this should be the dominant
the
This
same.
actually makes
Okay,
more sense than a lot of the a lot of the uniforms in modern Star Trek. Like,
gotcha.
yeah, we've had to accept that like uniforms aren't always uniform, and we've seen uses of different mix and match uniforms before over the
Joel
years.
says
So
Admiral's privilege. I'll go with that.
it's also a fantasy though, so I wouldn't. This is in the fantasy. That's what Boimler's admirals wear. I'm
That's
more
also
curious.
my least favorite Admiral's uniform, by the way. I hate that one.
Oh, why is that?
It looks ugly. It looks like kind of ugly to me. It looks like it.
You
I
don't
don't
like
know.
the big belt buckle?
Don't
That
like the
gives it
big
kind of a
belt
Texas
buckle.
flavor. I wear big belt buckles like that.
I think I would like it if the uniform was. I don't know. It just has a weird vibe. It looks more like a smoking jacket than a uniform, but you know.
Mm. The maybe the gold trim is a bit much, but
Hmm.
admiral uniforms in general kind of they're very hit or miss, aren't they? They're either like, oh yeah, that looks like really cool, or like, oh, that's so awkward and weird. Why did you do that?
Yeah, like remember Admiral Jameson had the most like gold or whatever. Like it was kind of a crazy
Yeah, or like
uniform.
when
Yeah,
when
like
Q turned himself into an
oh
admiral.
yeah, it was like yeah, wild Admiral uniform. That's
Yeah.
right.
I like Admiral Picard's wardrobe.
Yes.
Let's
Yeah,
stick
he's
with
got a cool
stick with
style. Yeah, it's
Admiral
true.
Picard. But yeah, not only should we talk about what the Admiral is wearing, but let's talk about what Fantasy Jennifer is wearing or not wearing.
She's in a
Endorian
bathing suit.
in a bikini, I guess. We've seen an Endorian woman stripped down to her undergarments before on Star Trek Enterprise. Uh, what was her name? Tala?
Tala,
Tala
that's
the
right. Yeah, I think
Endorian.
so.
I
Yeah, I think
actually
so.
went and checked to see if it was like the same style clothing, but it's not. It's
Oh,
like a
okay.
different like undershirt and stuff. Uh but yeah, so we have sexy Jennifer, who's also like very kind of like attached and loving and supportive, and saying like, I'm okay with labels when Mariner's like, we're not doing labels, we're just hanging out. But this is, like the fantasy doesn't lie, right? So this is what Mariner actually wants. And even when fantasy Jennifer is with fantasy Leia Brahms and is like, Mariner, come look at the warp core with us. And it's kind of like showing like, oh, see, Mariner is also like a nerd for the warp core.
Yeah.
And when she's blushing, when she's embarrassed again, I mentioned in the first episode when we saw Mariner break down crying on the bridge of the Cerritos when she wanted to go rescue her mom. We typically haven't gotten like much of Mariner being very vulnerable like that. And here we see like a different side of it. But she's telling Rutherford, stop looking at my heart rate and stuff. So I thought that was like really cute. I liked this. I loved getting to see this.
Yeah, it was a very good moment. Very funny. Lots of great gags with Jennifer here. So I wonder now. So now that this is kind of like come to light, like I wonder if we'll see Jennifer, actual Jennifer, and Mariner deal with some of these things.
Yeah, I would love to see like real Jennifer, not just like fantasy Jennifer. But in a way, this is kind of an honest depiction
Yeah.
of because now we understand, what Mariner really wants out of the relationship, and she's like, yeah, like she really wants to be girlfriends with Jennifer, but we saw later that she also has like a fear of settling down and becoming like the boring old couple.
Right.
So it's very insightful. But enough about the fantasies. I guess we should talk about when Stevens comes, makes a mess of things. Then we get into the nightmares, right?
Yeah, this was pretty funny. Like Steven's reacting to Mariner, and it just goes completely wrong.
When
Wrong.
he's
He
like,
knocks over the whole thing.
"Don't be throwing these around like a bunch of dang basketballs." Right? He kind of went like a little like Hank Hill or something there for a moment. Like, but
These green balls are literally nightmare fuel if you think about it. So that's pretty
they are
funny.
nightmare fuel. Yes, well, only when they're broken
Yeah,
in their
exactly.
shattered form. It's interesting that they're fantasy rocks until you break them, and they become nightmare rocks. But yeah, the way that Mariner got Stevens on board and a little too overzealous, but was saying that the Carlsbad lower deckers were talking shit about Ransom and said that he had a weak core. That was another laugh out loud moment for me when Stevens is like, "That's not true. He has one of the, he has the
Strongest.
strongest core in the fleet."
That's pretty funny.
But then he
Boom. And there it is.
gets turned to stone by Kukulkan.
so so I mean it's wild. I want to know how they reversed this. I mean, I know how they grew the arms back, but anyways, we're getting ahead of ourselves. But yeah, it was. I was really scared that they actually did this. Like, I was like, in this moment, I was like, oh, "Is Stevens gone? Like, is that like, is
Yeah,
this like really happening?" Like,
I guess he is a bit expendable. If they were gonna kill someone on the
yeah.
Cerritos, I mean, they could always just like bring them back like Shax.
Clearly, there's something going on with the with with not dying on the Cerritos.
But what other nightmares do we get? There's Borg snake. There's Klingon clowns with batleth arms and
These are the best. And then the
a
raisin
mean
horror.
raisin. Yeah, that had to come from Boimler.
Yeah.
Growing up on the raisin vineyard, it was I don't know,
I've
a
been
scary raisin.
hoping. I know the California raisins are no longer considered to be acceptable, but I think this is
They're
as
not.
close we get. Yeah, they're kind of like, I don't know. That's what I heard. Like I heard they've been
Oh,
kind of outmoded,
okay.
but this is the closest we get to the California raisins. Is this beastie
Well, I mean,
raisin?
California is grape country. It's probably provided many raisins that take on human form in cartoons. So, but yeah, you're right. That is another animated raisin character to go alongside the California raisins of old, which I didn't know they'd been canceled. But
I don't know that I haven't. Have you seen California raisins in a while? I haven't seen them. Have you? They
I
just
haven't.
disappeared.
No.
Yeah, they just kind of disappeared. And then someone who I was talking to about it, because
Oh, did you hear it through the grapevine?
I thank you. You totally beat me to it. Dum Yes, Father, I heard it through the grapevine.
Yeah, they've been canceled.
Yep, that's what I heard.
Hashtag bring back the California raisins. Let's talk about the werewolf Jennifer though. What was your reaction to? I guess we had figured out what it was in the trailer.
We did because yeah, we're a little too eagle-eyed for lower decks there, but this was hilarious. Like her tearing Jennifer in half. It's really gory too. Look at all the that's wild. But
The
yeah,
blue blood flying around and blue guts spilling out. But yeah, the werewolf Jennifer is like really clingy and is talking about like we're gonna grow flowers together and uh so that's part of Mariner's night. I don't know like the werewolf side of it, but I mean, some people, there's like a furry community out there. Like
Yes.
this
Sorry,
might have,
that's exactly where my mind went, by the way.
yeah, this might have fallen into like the fantasy side of things
Yeah.
for some of them.
It may suggest some of like Mariner's kinks, perhaps.
This is a part of herself she's afraid of. But I guess we should get into the cave outpost that they hide in, and then while they're in there, that's when they kind of start to bond with the Carlsbad people, and uh, the mysteries start to get revealed here pretty quickly when I guess starting with the Borg snake coughing up the basketball, and they're like, wait, no one here is scared of basketball. And it's like, oh, I just happened to be thinking of basketball. And then Mariner being like, oh yeah, I just happened to be thinking of hats because I heard
Right.
Levy mansplaining the difference between a fedora and a is it pig pie? Pork pie?
I think
Pork pie, yeah, pork
yeah,
pie.
pork pie.
But yeah, I don't know what's going. Like the Klingon clown is playing a trombone. The werewolf is dancing. The raisin is eating soup or something. Um, this is something that we saw this in the trailer for the season, and we were just like, "What the hell is going on here?" Like this is crazy stuff, right?
It's very Federico Fellini in a weird way with the trombone and stuff. It's really wild.
Some of the most absurd imagery, not just in Lower Decks, but I would say in all of Star Trek. This is one of the most absurd things we've ever seen.
Yeah, but it was cool that they solved the kind of mystery in that way of like there was a consistency to them, and then all of a sudden, like, oh, there's like a chink in the matrix, so to speak, and they figured it out. I like that part a lot.
Right. The scientists and rock people had teamed up to get more information out of people's brains and basically learn Starfleet secrets and classified stuff, and they wanted to sell that on the black market to buy rocks and better science equipment. The little memory dome that's like playing videos of like their memories, kind of a cool, I guess, visual presentation to
Yeah,
show the audience exactly what's going on. But
did this remind? Well, I'm sure you'll go over it in the Easter eggs, but remind me of stuff we've seen before.
You cut out. What did you say?
Oh, I think you'll probably have this lined up for the Easter eggs, but this chamber reminded me of stuff we've seen before too.
Oh, what did it remind you of?
Like the Sargon episode with the sphere, just the way it looks, like kinda,
what are the tomorrow not return to
yeah.
tomorrow,
And then that central,
not all our yesterdays, but one of those.
And then the central thing looks like the Gamesters
Tomorrow's,
of Triskelion with the dome, kind of in the center of the room. With it didn't do the visuals like it did here, but it had
like the little brains in there,
brains inside. Yeah, exactly.
little gummy brains.
Yeah. I could imagine if it was developed today that they would have had like projections from the brains, like conveying things to Captain Kirk.
I like Ensign Kearns had her uncle Trent drunk dancing at her cousin's wedding was in her memories, and then Mariner's reaction like, "Oh, get it, Trent."
Uncle Trent.
But the Mariner says, "Okay, well, y'all are gonna get the full Cerritos experience," and then they take crystals and pipes and whatever they have to make weapons out of, and start fighting the nightmares. We didn't get much action here, but we got like the gag of Boimler and Kearns both trying to hail their ships, and like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you. Oh, do you want me to go stand over here?" Like that felt so real. That felt so like those awkward things that happen in real life all the time.
Totally.
Yeah, I don't know. You have any other thoughts on the nightmares, the fantasies, or any of that?
I mean, other than the obvious like laughter from the gags, like it was just really fun to see these two crews kind of get together, and I get a kick out of that kind of Ghost Starfleet kind of vibe, and so
yeah, when they're all working together, it's kind of cool.
So that was like a delightful portion of this segment.
Out of all of these nightmares, the werewolf Endorian girlfriend, the Klingon clowns with the batleth arms, the Borg snake, the mean raisin, which would
Cool.
you be most frightened of? Or people in our
Oh,
live audience, what
frightened
would y'all
of
be
those
frightened of?
clown Klingons with the batleths, because clowns already scare me. So like that's like it. That's it. Like...
I think if I saw all these creatures in real life, the snake might be the
Oh, the
scariest.
Borg snake.
Yeah, it's like I might be able to
Would it be a
to
Snorg?
a snorg. Oh,
Yeah,
or it might be a
a bake.
yeah. I don't know. I don't like either one of those. I don't like either one of those descriptors. I don't know. What would you see if you were on this planet with the broken orbs? What would your nightmare be?
Freaking Shiva Sfajo or whatever the f that guy's name is from the all the toys. Hate
Oh,
him
from the
with
most toys.
the most toys. Yeah, hate him with a passion. He would totally be in my nightmares. Also, the schisms. What are they like? The click click click. You know those alien those
The
abducting
clickety clicks
aliens. Yeah, the
that
clickety
abducted
click.
people of the next
Yeah,
generation. Yeah,
those guys still scare the heck out of me to this day.
it
So
wouldn't be the
yeah.
conspiracy bugs.
No, they don't bother me as much because I wouldn't eat one. Like I would never let it go in my mouth. I'd try to kill it, but homeboy just like goes over, turns his head to, and like accepts one, and I'm like, oh.
I think my nightmare would be being forced to sing "Faith of the Heart."
Oh, it's gonna happen. That dang, your nightmare's gonna happen. Wow.
Well, y'all are gonna make it come true then, I guess.
We'll see. We'll see. I think it will happen though. I'm very excited.
What about your fantasy? What would be your fantasy on Genghis
Mm.
4?
It changes with every new episode of Star Trek I revisit or watch, because I have an episode like fantasy husband every week, as you may know. But I think that like as an adult now in my 40s, I could see myself hanging out a lot with Dr. Crusher and maybe Jordy, and we'd just be like chilling and cool, like have our wine and cheese, gatherings and watch old movies and that kind of stuff. It'd be fun. Oh, but as far as like if you're talking about like a romantic fantasy,
I think my
it's Elnor 100%. So but I was just thinking of
well,
like
just whatever
just
would appear to you on this planet.
yeah. Oh, Elnor. Oh, then it's Elnor. Elnor would be like kissy face with me the whole time. It would be great.
Elnor.
Yeah.
Okay. I think mine would be Tawny Newsome, Chase Masterson, and Terry Farrell like all show up and they're like, Fathery, we need you to come with us right now because we're rebuilding the set of Deep Space Nine to shoot live action Star Trek that'll physically return to Deep Space Nine. We're going to build that entire promenade set and we're going to let you live there with all of us.
Dang.
That would be my fantasy.
Like you would live there. That's legit, Fathery.
I would live at Quark's Bar, yes.
That's amazing. You're like, hold my beer, Morn.
I'm curious, what do people think their fantasy or their nightmare would be on Genghis?
Yeah,
4?
let us
I'd be
know.
curious
That'd
to
be
hear from people.
Fun to hear about.
But yeah, if that's everything on the actual A plot, we can go ahead and get into the B plot and talk about the Tendi stuff back on the ship with
This was
Mr.
great.
Maglimo.
The charred bugs that are still
Oh, the
alive,
charred Corvarian sludge worms. Yeah.
That I don't know how to feel about the fact that they're charred and they're still alive. Like that's kind of.
Well, are they alive? I don't know. Maybe that's
they're wiggly.
Some animals are still wiggly after they die. Like,
that's true. That's a really
cut
good
off
point.
A chicken's head. They're gonna go crazy for a bit.
But charred suggests that they're like cooked in high heat, like really well. Like you have to like cook something at like really high heat to.
No, char just means like you like have like a good sear on it, right?
Oh, okay. I always assume charred is a little more darkened or almost like blackened, like on the way to blackened is what.
Oh, maybe it is.
Yeah,
I don't know.
But either way, it was that was a funny moment, and it's very appropriate that he's eating worms. It's
like, it's funny how disappointed she was like immediately, but she's so nice and polite. But it's like, I mean, it's Tendi, but yeah, she's so excited to do like her science training, and then she's like, "Oh, my mentor is gonna be this idiot eating worms who doesn't know anything about science. He literally is like, "Oh, there's a lot of sciences, aren't there? Too many, if you ask me." Which he's being like so nice and polite and like like the good kid at school. Like, well, it seems like the right amount to me, but
And he says, I think he says why he became the mentor because like all the other officers were like really busy or something like that.
yeah,
So
just through the chain of command, it fell to him. I
it
guess
fell to him. It's
senior
really
officers do these mentor things at times, but yeah, and Paul F. Tompkins is incredibly funny. Speaking of Star Trek Day, he co-hosted the Star Trek Day
yeah.
event with Tawny Newsome, but he's a very very funny guy. I'm wondering if like he ad libs a lot of the stuff. I suspect I know that Tawny Newsome ad libs a bunch of her lines, and they're both trained as improvisers. So, but his delivery is very hilarious and he's a cool addition to the show. I'm glad that they have him. He voices multiple characters. He's also like one of the scientists.
Yeah, I heard his it's neat because he does do it different, but I did hear his familiar voice
Oh,
quality.
and he's the Tellarite. He's the Tellarite
Yeah, I
from
think
the
he might be the
Carlsbad as
Tellarite.
well.
And then he might even be like the rock guy or the other guy. I'm not
No,
sure. I think it's the other guy.
He's the scientist
The scientist guy.
who's
Yeah,
causing
you already
trouble.
said that. Yeah, sorry.
But I all jokes aside, the serious part of this, I did like that the manual he's reading from, that the basically the Cliff Notes version of what a science officer is, if you have to sum it up in one sentence, the science officer has to be the voice of science to the captain.
Yeah.
And I love that explanation. I was like, oh yeah, that is actually a pretty brilliant, elegant, accurate way of describing the role of a science officer in a Star Trek show. And that
Yeah,
you
I
have
would
to
agree
cut through
with
the
that.
captain's ego to, you have to be like science's advocate. So the devil's
Right.
advocate, you're science's advocate.
And that's an interesting concept because like it changes from captain to captain. Like Janeway, I feel like was a very at least engineering wise, or she had a lot of science
Well, she was a science officer before becoming
before
captain.
becoming captain. So yeah, it was interesting to see that dynamic. Whereas there's other captains that you're like, yeah, they definitely rely heavily on their science officers.
Yeah, and they all do it at some point, except for on Next Generation where there's not a science officer. But
Data
uh,
kind of becomes the science officer in a
he was
weird
supposed
way.
to be originally. He was going to be the
Interesting,
science
yeah.
officer, but then the blue uniforms looked weird with his eyes, with his yellow
Uh
eyes, so they put him in a gold uniform. And they invented the ops position, which was always kind of oddly undefined. Like I'm not
yeah.
sure exactly what all an ops officer does, but other than that they're the second in command, or I mean, I'm sorry, third in command.
There's a lot of blue on Enterprise in TNG though, so there's a lot of science officers available. Like there's a lot of scientists available.
Yeah, and they have like a
As
lab
a
for everything.
yeah,
So there's plenty
yeah,
of science officers on the ship. I should have said where there's not a senior
right.
science officer. But yeah, Tendi kind of has a hard time being the voice of science. She's a little intimidated when she's actually in the room with the captains and the treaty negotiation and all of that, and kind of has a hard time, speaking up loud enough for anyone to listen to her when the Scrubble offer the totem to Freeman. We learn about the plot later, but I thought that was pretty funny actually, the two captains fighting over who would actually accept it, and that they're both kind of ageist against the other one. like Captain Mayer, that's the name of the Carlsbad cap. But yeah, he's like the young fresh-faced captain, and Freeman is, I guess, a little intimidated by that, but then I guess he's probably like a little intimidated of her age and experience. So, where he's like, my generation doesn't, collect little trinkets like that, and she's like, what do you mean, your generation? And when he says, no, well, it'll be good seeing how the old school does this or something like that, and they end up getting along in the end. But yeah, I thought it was kind of fun.
Yeah, the relationship was great. I really dig. I don't know what the kind of I don't know what the end game is gonna be with these characters, but I like Captain Freeman a lot. Like I think she's so good this like these last two seasons, and I'm always like very happy when we get a Captain Freeman moment. I think also her gags are just as funny as everyone else, and it is interesting to see like where Mariner kind of gets they've done such a good job, I think, whether it's the performers doing this maybe just because they're friends and stuff like that, or they're getting closer, or if it's in the writing. But like there's definitely like a kind of, you can see how, it feels so real that they're mother and daughter, Mariner and Freeman. And yeah, and I like her style. I like Captain Freeman a lot. Actually, I would not mind serving under Captain Freeman. She's a pretty cool captain.
We
Captain,
honestly see some similarities between the mother and daughter here with
yeah,
Freeman and Mariner, because they're both kind of like they both kind of feel intimidated by like the other ship, and they're like, well, I'm not gonna let them kind of outshine me. Like I
right.
gotta show I can compete too. And
She's also very annoyed that he's not respecting like the kind of unwritten rule of like older captains or captains with more experience get to say, get to order a younger captain around a little bit, and she's like, take the gift, and he's like, no, the fact that he's like fighting around this one, it's like, it's probably really annoying to her. She's like, no, it's part of the tradition. And then I also like that, by the way, is the whole how the little trinkets or like things that remind you of like the missions. That's like it. I don't think TOS did it so much, although you saw things in Captain Kirk's
TOS, you had like
quarters.
weird stuff on like
Yeah,
the
you got the
people's shelves and
suggestion,
their quarters.
right?
And
You got the suggestion that these were from missions for sure, but TNG really kind of did it with like things like the Resican flute and the
the
tapestry
tapestry and the ready room and
in
the
the ready room and all kinds of things. So they all, these are
the
things we
Shakespeare
saw.
book, the
Yeah, yeah.
sextant.
Yeah, exactly. And even Cisco with his baseball, I would say, and
Mm. Oh
things
yeah, and
like
then he
that.
had like a model ship of the
Mm-hmm.
Dauntless class Horizon
That's right.
in his office.
So having little things from your missions or stuff like that, that's a cool little tradition. And I like that she was trying to teach Captain Mayor, and he's like, my generation doesn't believe in keeping like
Well,
stuff,
that's kind of a real world. Like I know like your Gen Xers and your baby boomers are more likely to have like collectibles, and a lot
Mm-hmm.
of like your younger millennials or like your Zoomers, like they tend to like not have they're less likely to be collectors of stuff or like have like a lot of clutter.
To a
I think
degree, it's because digital stuff is becoming so like, most of
yeah,
the
like
things we collect are
digital
books and
books,
yeah,
digital
exactly.
movie. Like people don't buy like movies or video games as much
Right.
anymore. It's more like digital stuff. I think that's part of it. I think another big part of it is also just it's a lot harder for young people to own homes these
Right.
days, and
Right.
everyone's like a renter, and they're having to move every couple of years, and yeah, so they're just kind of doing the Spartan life and traveling light as they move from home to home, where they're having to move back in with their parents or something like that. But
Yeah, that's legit.
I think that's another factor. But yeah, it's definitely a real life generational divide. I know like most of the people older than me are more likely to have kind of like those old school collectibles than people younger than me.
Hey, I kind of go through that too. Like I know that I rent. I'm a renter, even though it's my own family, but I still I rent. So it's like I don't own a place, so I gotta like, yeah, I always have to be mindful of keeping things light in case I have to move.
I love to collect, but I don't have a very large home, so I'm gonna either have to figure out how to buy a bigger one at some point or start getting rid of stuff.
It's time to open up the Tex-Trek Star Trek Museum. That's a lot to say.
Antonia must not be able to hear me because she would be an advocate for me getting rid of stuff if she could. I hear her laughing, so she's listening after all.
That's funny.
Let's get into the Tiana stuff with
Yeah, this is.
Tendi going to her true mentor, Dr. Tiana, for advice when the going gets hard. Uh, I liked the Dr. Tiana as kind of a an asshole and kind of a hard ass, but is also sensitive and caring enough to like still take interest in Tendi and try to help her out. But when Tendi shows up and Dr. Tiana's like, oh my god, are you about to cry? Ugh. And then she's just like, well, I guess we're doing this. But yeah, I enjoyed all of that. The guy getting his foot cut off, I thought that was a bit much. I kind of cringed. I knew it was coming from the trailer, but when Tiana like pulled out the Starfleet issued chainsaw that has like the Delta on it, I was like, did we really need that? But I guess that thing is hard to remove after it started to attach itself to someone's foot. But I don't know. What do
Father,
you think of this?
my answer is yes, 100%. We did need that. Um, no, I didn't really care one way or the other about the chainsaw, but the gag is hilarious. I mean, like the fact that she's cutting off the foot. And it's true. Like, I guess the Star Trek's interesting because we have a combination of things. Like in the future, it looks like some things you can solve by just regrowing a part, and then other things you need like a bionic implant or like what I mean. Like, it's very interesting. Like the different kinds of ways of healing injuries of this sort in Star Trek. But yeah, he's gonna be all right. He's gonna regrow. He's gonna regrow that foot. But yeah, the gag is great. Tendi and Tiana are a delightful couple, and I was kind of missing their vibe, so I like that they got together for this scene, and it was really touching. It's even funnier. We'll get to that, I'm sure, but like when she's thinking about her mentor later in the episode, like
Yeah, that was a laugh out loud moment for me. We'll get
that's
to it in a bit, but
right.
the whole reason Tindy is on this new trajectory to one day become a senior science officer is because of Dr. Tiana, taking interest in her and being like, oh
Right.
yeah, you have so much potential, like you need to go do the science officer thing. And so it's kind of cool to loop back and remind us of that here in this episode. Um, and yeah, it is visually hilarious to see a cat person wielding a chainsaw with excitement about to remove someone's foot, and the poor bastard screaming as we all would, I'm sure, if faced with the situation. But yeah, it felt kind of extreme for me. But
I
what
was cracking up, but I
what
love
was the
Dr.
what was the
Tana.
advice that, like, you have to risk getting messy
Yeah,
sometimes, like
like this, and she goes, and then it goes right into the gag of cutting, like when I'm gonna cut his foot out, and then he's like, "What are you gonna do?"
so just go, don't be scared to get your hands dirty. Just go ahead and go through when you have to. So that was to encourage her to, I guess, speak up a little louder. I don't know if all that tied together great, but it at the end of the day, it's like I said, I still had a fantastic time with this episode, so I'm not going to harp on it too much. But let's talk about the ending. When Tindy does eventually, everyone's yelling in the ready room or the conference room or whatever. Mariner shows up and she's yelling. The Scrubble is yelling. The scientist is yelling. Both captains are yelling. Shax is yelling that he's having flashbacks. That's when Tindy yells and breaks the totem and reveals, oh, those unusual readings that she's been trying to tell everyone about was actually from a spy device, Starfleet technology. The scientists are working alongside with the Scrubble, and they were trying to bug a captain's ready room.
All that sensitive information on a California class, all that top secret stuff that that they'll get from a California class ship.
Yeah, from second contact missions. I'm sure you'd get some stuff.
Yeah, it's true.
I liked the Shax moment when the
Hmm.
Scrubble and the scientist they're just gonna try to like sneak out, and then Shax is like standing behind them, looking all tough.
Poor Shax earlier when they were all like yelling, he's like, "I'm getting flashbacks." I thought that
Yeah,
was really
was
funny
he about
too.
to
I
have like
was
a
like,
PTSD melt, like go back to like, I don't know, seeing like his family getting killed by Cardassians during the occupation or something? Like, yeah.
yeah, not supposed to be laughing at that stuff usually, but the way that it's done in Lower Decks, I just couldn't help myself. It was just too funny. Like the poor Shax. I just felt for Shax.
Linda Marks in our live audience is asking, does this mean that intro scene was fake? And I think because there were so many statue scientists that have been turned to stone on the planet's surface, I think that there actually was an incident that happened. And then after the intervention of the USS Hood, that's when some of these scientists and Scrubble decided that, to work together and try to
Mm.
pull a fast one on Starfleet. But that is a good question to bring up. They don't spell that out, so it is kind of up to our imaginations. That's how I picture it playing out. But I don't know, Starfleet boy, what do you think about that?
I think that's the case too. I think that like I do think the scientists, at least this one here, was in cahoots or cat boots with the Scrubble for a long time because they had that pretty intricate infrastructure set up down on the planet. So I think they've been doing this like gag, not a gag, but it is a gag. But they've been doing this like routine for a while, and I do think unfortunately those scientists may have succumbed to petrification. However, it seems reversible. If Stevens was able to get unpetrified, I feel like maybe those
Right.
scientists are okay. So
The chief medical officer on the Hood probably figured that out, and there were like all
right.
like these cool moments in this whole episode of Star Trek we didn't
Right,
see
that we
it.
don't even get to see.
It's like
But
the
that being
season premiere where we don't see all the cool stuff with Batesman and Tuvok and all of that.
might be frustrating for some, but I really dig it. I love that Lower Decks does that. Like I like that a
Yes,
lot. Like yeah,
it's it's
it's
the
part
point
of
of the show. You know,
the
it's
yeah, it's part of the fun of the show too.
showing
Yeah.
us the quote unquote unimportant people on unimportant ships doing the unimportant missions. You know,
Right. Jill points out as long as the statue's head didn't come off. That's true. It's like Highlander. You can't recover them if their heads come off.
from a
So
broken head.
yeah, it's true. There can be only one. But I think overall, like yeah, like to me, it seems like there's something going on. Like Lower Decks is painting this picture. We do still have our like lovely Starfleet or like the impression of a good Starfleet, as we've seen in the opening episode where like Starfleet does come through in the end. But Lower Decks is showing like that there is a lot of like stuff to start. We're starting to see, what's interesting is like the second contact ship has already kind of like accidentally been involved in like intrigue with the pack leads, and like here they're uncovering another like reconnaissance type thing. Like there's like all these things that they seem to be recovering, and these like bad guys are intentionally, I think, doing stuff on the fringes right now. So like the California classes and ships like that just do these routine patrol missions or whatever,
Right.
they're
They
like
have a useful function
right,
within the Federation, within this future. Like
right.
they still have a very important role.
Right. And as we see here, like I think this is going to build up to something because like, just go with me on this one here for a second. But like in Star Trek Picard, the Federation's in pretty bad shape. At least Starfleet is, with the infiltration of the Tal Shiar and Commodore Oro. I know it may not be as like as clear as maybe I'm saying it right now, but like there's definitely the implication that Starfleet's kind of screwed, and like they have they're hoodwinked, or they have the wool pulled over their eyes, by these bad actors. And I think we're starting to see like the beginnings of that kind of stuff here, where it's like Starfleet's getting maybe a little too arrogant, or maybe a little too busy, like maybe they're just a little too stretched,
Yeah,
you
or
know.
just
And
haven't recovered from the Dominion War.
war, yeah. And so there's a lot of strain on on Starfleet. I like that Commodore but yeah, I think I mean maybe the show's not going there, but I think it's interesting how these like little plots keep getting uncovered by like the Cerritos and like the lower deckers, so to speak.
Mm. And I don't necessarily need Lower Decks to tie into the Zotvash infiltration of Starfleet to make that point, but
Right.
I think overall just the notion of, yeah, like the boring second contact ship still has an important function in society, and without them things like this wouldn't get taken care of, and so they're still major contributors. I think that really ties in like the larger theme of Lower Decks, which is sometimes the lower ranking people, the little people, the less important, quote unquote, less important people, sometimes they're going to be the MVP. They need to be part of the conversation. They need to be included too, because they're going to have contributions to make. And that's the guys at the top don't always have all the answers or can't get it all done themselves. And
Right.
I think that's a great message to have in the Star Trek universe. And I appreciate Lower Decks kind of being the champion of that idea.
I dig it. Yeah.
But yeah, we get a celebration in the Cerritos bar. Stevens gets cinnamon schnapps in his eye, which I'm sure sounds like it would burn. And then, yeah, this is what you were talking about. This made me laugh out loud when Maglimo is celebrating with Tendi about her science mentorship, and when Tendi says, yeah, it It worked out great thanks to my great mentor. And she's looking over at Dr. Tiana. But then when Maglimo like pops up in the frame and like, yes, I was a great mentor or whatever he says. But yeah,
It's almost
that
like
made
he
me laugh.
noticed he it's almost like he noticed she wasn't looking at him, and like he's like, "Oh, let me remind you who your mentor actually is."
I think he didn't notice at all. I think he's just like so oblivious.
He
But
is
yeah,
so
he
he's
was a
so
funny
terrible. I
character. I
love it.
think this is my
Yeah.
favorite use of Maglimo in the
Yeah, he was
entire
great in
show.
this episode. Yeah.
And Mare and Freeman make up. They
Hmm.
agree to share the totem. Freeman, of course, keeping the bigger half for herself. And then at the end, we have the Carlsbad lower deckers and the Cerritos lower deckers all sitting around the table together. And I don't know, just had like a big smile on my face. I was so satisfied watching this final scene of the episode, hearing them talk about how they've heard all these cool stories. You know, Mariner's the unstoppable force of nature. Rutherford's a genius with crazy implant powers. Tendi is a ray of optimistic sunshine. It's like, yeah, that's how we would describe these characters. They're fellow fans. Like they watch the show too, you know?
Yeah.
And then the Boimler gag at the end is like, well, why the hell are people saying he's a tiny comedic robot? Like always getting into trouble. Like what the hell does that even mean? Or people think he's a hovering cube?
I love that. Like, I love that she's like, he's like, "I'm people, I promise," and she's like, "Boimler's just like a robot." She just like
Boimler wants to be people. Yeah.
people. That's really funny. Yeah, that is pretty funny because like the things they describe are like the cube, the floating cube was that cube thing, the thing, the dog creature that from the farm episode. Remember, at one point it didn't turn into a floating cube, but it turned into
Oh,
like a
the
cube
dog did turn to a cube. It was rolling
and was like
around. I mean,
rolling
the
around.
comedic robot or hovering cube, that's kind of like in Prodigy in First Contact.
Oh
uh,
right,
the Ferengi woman Nandi, right? She had a
right,
little floaty robot thing.
right, right,
But
right.
I think just the way that they like animate these, I think like they probably would have been writing this episode, you know, way before anyone had seen anything
That yeah.
from Prodigy. So who knows? I don't think that was meant to connect. But that's the only thing I could think of. Is like when was
But
there a hovering cube robot?
but just I guess going back to like Boimler being so kind of like unnoticed that like people have these wild ideas of who he actually is because no one really like no one really takes true account of him, which is really funny gag.
I don't know. They might have just been like giving him a hard time. I don't know, but yeah, the episode both started on a really high note for me and ended on a really high note for me. It gave me several things I was asking for. It, you know, gave me one of those misdirects that I didn't see coming, so that felt really good. And I think that this episode did a good job of kind of focusing on its own lore and character work and stuff that it's built up over the years, instead of relying on a lot of like the callbacks and Easter eggs and stuff. It did sneak some of that in there. As an
Yeah.
animated series fan, I love seeing Kukulkan, but I think for the most part, it was just kind of focused on its own history, and that's a smart route to take the show. You know, now that we're getting into like the middle of the third season of it.
Yeah, I feel like now we really know these characters, and so it's fun to just kind of riff off of their own quirks and their own things like that they've established. I think they're doing a
Mm-hmm.
really good job at balancing, you know, that idea of like wanting to be a love letter to all of Star Trek, but also wanting to be your own thing. And I think Lower Decks is really doing a good job of like getting into its own groove, and I agree with you on that.
And speaking of love, they don't push it very often, but I think they do keep hinting at it. We're eventually going to get something between Tendi and Rutherford. I picked
It
up on a
does
little bit of that
seem to
here.
be, yeah, it does seem to be heading in that direction, but who
I mean,
knows?
Badgie, he told his son Badgie in the holodeck. You know, he's like, just look at her, she's so cute. And that moment where like their little magnetic boots stuck to each other and stuff, and also just when she's like, you know, I hope I die from like my brain exploding from science or whatever, and then Rutherford's like yeah, that's the way I want to go out, and we see like his dream girl is like this like nerdy science lady.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I think that they're doing a kind of a slow burn, but that's something that I'm wanting to see now. Is I want to see you know, that relationship go somewhere.
I mean, yeah, I think it will. I think it's nice to have like at least one couple to kind of represent that aspect of life in a show. So I don't think we get enough of Captain Freeman and Admiral Freeman. There's just not that opportunity. So it would be cool to see like Tendi and Rutherford maybe get together. But I'm also kind of gunning for I want to kind of see. I want to see Mariner and Jennifer. Maybe that might be a neat relationship to explore.
Yeah,
As
definitely want to
well.
see more of that.
Yeah.
Anything else on this episode before we go into the Gorn egg section of the show?
No, but it was it was hecka fun recapping it with you and the audience. So yeah, I'm excited about the Gorn eggs because you always catch it. You always do a good job at catching them. Gotta
Well,
catch them all.
but it's Gorn instead of Pokemon.
Yeah.
So these are the Gorn eggs I found in the show, or if you don't know what I'm talking about, that's the Easter eggs, in jokes, and continuity connections that I thought were worth mentioning. But starting right off the bat, we get the USS Hood with Captain Murakami. The Hood is a very famous ship. It first showed up in Encounter at Farpoint and is mentioned several
Yeah,
times
she
throughout the
is.
Next Generation and Deep Space Nine. I think the last we saw the Hood, it was supposed to be part of that fleet that was going to intercept and help out the Enterprise E in Star Trek Nemesis, but it never showed up because they were trying to keep the budget down, so none of the Starfleet reinforcements showed up. Originally in the script,
And
they wanted to have some Starfleet ships there at that battle, but they're like, "Oh no, it's too expensive." But yeah, the Hood, it even kind of echoes its original appearance in Encounter at Farpoint when it parts ways with the Enterprise. It's framed very similar here to when it parts ways with the Kali class ships orbiting Genghis 4. So great to see it. A new captain now, Captain Murakami. The Scrubble themselves, they are a silicate-based life form. We've had
we've
silicon
had that
life in
before,
Star
yep.
Trek before. I think first appearing in Devil in the Dark on the original series with the Horda. But this episode had strong vibes of home soil. The first season of
Mm,
Next Generation episode. I mean, the whole idea of like the science outpost and these scientists getting in trouble there, and silicon based life. I kind of married that with the fantasy aspect, something we would see in like Shore Leave or
right.
in the Voyager episode Bliss, something like that. Or even like the Man Trap, it kind of had a fantasy element to how the salt vampire worked. The Carlsbad itself, we have a new California class ship named after Carlsbad, California. The character Core D on the Carlsbad, he was the Zaldan character with the webbed hands. That species we saw in the Next Generation episode Coming of Age. It's a dude who Wesley Crusher bumped in the hallway, but then he was like being kind of mean and standoffish to him, and but to show that like, oh, I noticed his webbed hand, and that's how these people interact in a situation like this. It's insulting to to be polite. So
I wish they had played off of that a little more with that character, but
yeah,
it's
they didn't
cool.
really
I
do that
like
with Core D, but I don't know.
yeah,
Maybe
but I
he's from
like
like a
that.
different part of that planet or something.
Yeah, or he just like whatever. It's like yeah,
He's
but
just not
they
as
don't
big of
have
an
to do it. But
asshole as the guy
it
the guy in
they
Coming
did
of
have
Age.
him. I noticed the screenshot you just showed as a comparison. He does always kind of have like a little bit more of a like a what do you call it, like a his brow's always a little more serious. So he does
Hmm.
seem a little more like serious than the other characters. So I think that's good that I think they capture that pretty well. Oh, one quick thing about the Hood, Fathery. The Hood is one of the ships in Star Trek that has like a tradition in naval history. So the original HMS Hood was from
Yeah,
1859. So yeah, she's a famous named ship.
yeah.
But
The
anyways,
Hood in the World War II.
yeah, there's also a Hood in
That
World
was
War
sunk
II.
by the Bismarck.
Mm-hmm. That's right. That's right. You know your history there.
You know, Johnny Horton made a country song about it.
Oh, okay. That I didn't know.
Um, I think it was him.
Oh, I like what you're going to do next. I just saw a little sneak.
So, with they're asking Lieutenant Commander Stevens, what do we do? If these fantasies are coming after us, he says, "Well, I don't know. Just think about Parisi's squares." It's kind of like if you can't get dirty thoughts out of your head, just think about baseball, like that old.
Baseball, which is funny because I find baseball players very sexy, so I feel like that would make
Yeah, I'm sure a
my
lot of
dirty
people
thoughts
do.
more.
That's
Yeah.
yeah, maybe not like the best advice for
But
that, but
Rutherford kind of says something like that. He's like, "Oh yeah, shiny blue skin tight suits." That's he's
yeah, he's talking
like,
about like the mallets or something. So, but yes, we don't know a ton about Parisi's squares. We know that it's some sport in the future. It's mentioned several times throughout Star Trek, but we did see Parisi's square suits and gear in the Next Generation episode 11001010, whatever it's called. A lot of season one stuff. There's a lot of this is coming from season one of Next Generation, which I find interesting.
that is interesting.
This was another cool thing that where I thought it was cool, anyways. But the forward in the science officer training manual was written by Ambassador Spock, and I just thought that was cool to point out that yeah, at this time, not only is Spock in real life, he's like the OG science officer, but in universe, he would still be alive. And when Maglimo is like saying like, oh look, a quote from Ambassador Spock, like Spock is
Mm-hmm.
still alive. He'd be chilling on Romulus at this point. It's before the Nova, before he went back in time and all that. But yeah, I just thought that was a cool acknowledgement. Like it makes sense that he would be kind of like the most famous science officer ever. And so I like that he's the guy who like literally wrote the book on
Right.
science officerness. How to science officer.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Leia Brahms, as we all know, originally appeared in the Next Generation. She was in 2 episodes, Booby Trap and Galaxy's Child, and the attire she's wearing is actually the same outfit she wore in Galaxy's Child. When we meet the real Leia Brahms, not the hologram, but the real
Right.
one.
Which is a great episode. I have to watch that one again because I didn't remember a lot of. I don't remember a lot from that episode, but it's a good episode. There's a lot of interesting things that I didn't realize when I always realized that Geordi was a bit cringy with what he did, but I never took it as like kind of a thing where he needs to be like sort of admonished for it because I always thought it was like a
Well,
desperate situation. But I've heard a lot of like really great opinions from people who would have like a better opinion on this, which is from women, and it's put an interesting perspective on it. But I still stand by my kind of assertion that like in the future when you join up with the service, so to speak, that you maybe you check a little box that gives the holodeck people the permission to recreate you in the
so
holodeck.
Geordie's allowed to make deep fake porn of her because if you're in Starfleet, you have to agree to that.
But that's not what he does, Father. That's totally not what he does. That's Barkley, by the way. We can talk. We can have a whole conversation about Barkley
Oh,
because
I'm just gonna quote or not quote. I'm gonna paraphrase LeVar Burton, who hated this aspect of the Geordie
yeah,
character. So
yeah,
I'm
it's
very
true.
confident that whoever we know that Geordie is gonna be married with kids. He's a
But
family
not with Leah.
man.
I'm convinced it's after this episode. I'm convinced it's not Leah
Yeah,
anymore.
I don't
By
think
the
it's gonna
way,
be Leia
yeah,
Brahms. I think
yeah.
Geordie is gonna be partnered with a different woman, and he's gonna a different mother of his children in Picard season 3
Right.
when we get to there, which is coming very soon, February 16th.
But that's interesting. So LeVar Burton himself, when this was being made, like kind of had objections about it. You're saying?
Yeah, he didn't like the whole notion of like Geordie being like the awkward dude who like
Yeah.
couldn't date women and had like this weird obsession with Leia Brahms, and
It
they
didn't
they
fit
eventually
his. It
abandoned
never
that.
fit
But
his character. I always felt sorry for like Jordy, but also like like I always felt like yeah, it didn't really fit. Jordy always seemed like a really kind of nice, charismatic kind of. I was like, who wouldn't want to? Like why? Not who wouldn't, but like he wouldn't have that many strikeouts. Like I feel like Jordy wasn't that bad. Like with his awkwardness, but I see what they were trying to do with the character. But yeah, it didn't work for me either.
Linda Marks in our audience is saying if Brahms is his wife in Picard
I'm
season
going
3,
to
she's going to
scream.
scream. So, but yeah, I don't think that they'll do that. But I don't know. We'll find out in a few months.
I think Linda and some other folks. Linda's like, "Do you agree for your likeness to be used in holodeck fantasy?" Sure, why not? I think it's like again. I think that's like an interesting thing to talk about because Barkley definitely is more up that tree. But as far as like just simulations, like I understood the original intent, which was like he wasn't able to interface with the computer as in the same way that he could with a human, so that's why he like made that kind of like move to create a Leah Brahms hologram. But yeah, Barkley, we can talk about Barkley and his goddesses of empathy and all that stuff.
Let's talk about the rest of these Gorn eggs.
Yeah, heck yeah.
Rutherford and Boimler point out to Mariner that they've had like some notable shenanigans when they're trying to figure out what's the reputation of the Cerritos. I don't know if I caught everything that they said because they're talking over each other and the subtitles didn't include everything, but they mentioned we tussled with Magados, we tussled with Packleds, twice with the Packleds. So that's Magado Gamato, no small parts, Wage Douge. Boimler says, well, there was that Klingon who took off in the ship when he was drunk. So that was in Envoys, right? The name of the second episode, Envoys.
Right.
They talk about, we scared the crap out of that drill instructor. So that's from I Excretus. The ship was terraformed. So that is Moist Vessels. And I loved, like, there's a line from Boimler in there where he says, was there a thing with time travel? Have we done a time travel thing? So not yet, but you will in Strange New Worlds.
Yeah, a little hint maybe. That's cool.
Then later in the cave, the Tellarite ensign brings up the time. He says, you four stood strong in an alien trial. And then Boimler corrects him.
It was more of a party.
It was more of a party, but yeah, so that's talking about Veritas in season 1. But the best Gorn egg has to go to Kukulkan, even though they mispronounce the name of Kukulkan. Steven says, "Oh no, Kukulkan." It's like no, it's Kukulkan.
Maybe this is a Macaulay Culkin Kukulkan.
You got to say it the way that Lieutenant Walking Bear said it, and how sharper than a serpent's tooth, way back in the animated series. But it's Kukulkan.
I can't wait till we get to these episodes. It's so exciting.
Well, that's
season 2.
20.
Right?
It's 20 episodes away, right? It's the second to last one. But yeah, how sharper than a serpent's tooth, and I'm cuckoo for Kukulkan. I learned that from Aaron Harvey. He said like he used to say that when he watched this as a kid back in the 70s or a rerun in the 80s or something. But yeah, cuckoo for Kukulkan. That's
really a neat. Can you go back to the new Kukulkan? Yeah, I like that. I like that it's a little different. Like I like the lower.
It's not really that different.
No, not that much. But like, similar. See how his purple thing around here, it's more like a flat. It looks like a daisy or a dahlia or something like that. And here it looks just kind of wilder.
Detail.
But yeah, but I love it. I still think it's very cool. It's very beautiful. It's like a great homage. It's in the style. They just change it up to the lower deck style.
If you don't know what Kukulkan is, though, that was in real life mythology a god in Aztec and Mayan mythology, and then actually turns out to be like an actual thing the Enterprise encounters in the animated series. So
right.
But yeah, Kukulkan. Next up in the Gorn eggs, Mariner recalls the time that Levy mansplained the difference between a pork pie and a fedora to a poor cadet. So I just want to remind people, if you don't remember who Levy is, that's Steve Levy. He's the guy who went on a date with Mariner one time. Yeah, he's a conspiracy theorist. He thought Wolf 359 was an inside job. He thought the Dominion War never happened. So that dude, if there's anyone mansplaining on the ship, I'm not surprised it's Levy. And then, this is if Kukulkan was my favorite Gorn egg, then this next one is my second favorite. But there's a cutting board when they have like the little snacks laid out for the treaty signing. So there's like an Enterprise cutting board that has like some cheese and stuff on it. That was a real piece of merchandise. You used to be able to like buy these from.
Do you have one?
No, I didn't get one, but I think it was like Think Geek that was putting it out. I don't know if you can still find them. They might be online somewhere now, but
I hope they reissue them for this.
Yeah, it was the Enterprise cutting board. I thought that was that was like a really. I saw that and I was like, "What is that? That actual?" And I looked up a picture of it. I was like, "Yeah, it's that same cutting board."
Captain Foley from Trek Yards has one, and he showed it off online. It was really funny.
Nice. And the final one I have at the very end is when Stevens is hitting on an annoyed Vulcan commander in the Cerritos bar. He's explaining that when he was brain dead, somehow he still saw a great koala sitting on a black mountain. So obviously talking about the cosmic koala that Lieutenant O'Connor saw when when he transcended back in Moist Vessel, season 1 episode. But also combining that with the Black Mountain that Shax spoke about, and we'll always have Tom Paris talking about his resurrection.
Yep.
So
And Mike McMahon recently did a Photoshop job on a picture from the James Webb telescope, but then unbeknownst to him, there was actually a koala shape in the nebula that he photoshopped his koala into the nebula for. So there is actually a cosmic koala out there.
The cosmic koala is real.
Is real. So yeah, it's pretty funny.
Interesting. Well,
I wonder if we'll ever see the Black Mountain. I'm really curious about the Black Mountain.
I kind of want them to back off the cosmic koala references. Like, I thought it was cool that someone mentioned it again after it was established in season 1. They mentioned it in season 2 when Boimler has his near-death experience in First Contact. But going forward, like, I don't need it to come up all the time, because it's going to be really weird if people keep mentioning it in Lower Decks, but no one else in the Star Trek universe ever seems to encounter the Great Koala. I mean, I don't know. Maybe the koala works in mysterious ways. Maybe it only reveals itself to people on California-class ships. I don't understand the koala. It's probably beyond my comprehension, but I think less might be more. But yeah, that's all I had for the Gorn eggs. But always a lot of fun to go over those with Lower Decks. Always a lot of cool stuff. What's also really cool is to hear what people in the Tex-Trek audience think about these episodes. So, if you have thoughts on this episode, let me know on Twitter. You can reply to my tweets. You can sound off on the Tex-Trek Facebook page or in the Tex-Trek Discord server, and we might share your response next week. I have a couple quick things from the YouTube comments last week talking about last week's episode. What was the name of last week's episode? I'm drawing a blank.
It was well, the first one was Grounded, and now I'm blanking too now. Great.
Last week's episode was
Let me see if I can get it faster than you. Dun, 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 dun,
oh, The Least Dangerous Game.
There we go. Thank you.
Sorry about that. But yeah, I have some responses from the YouTube talking about The Least Dangerous Game. Opinions No One Cares About says, I did like how the ensigns weren't in their usual pairs, and then how they were separated even further. But Tendi has gone a little unused so far. I'm hoping the next episode centers more around her and being in the senior science division now. So opinion no one cares about. I think we got your wish come true. So let us know, did that satisfy your desires? What they did with Tendi this week's episode?
Yeah, I wonder if it did. That's cool.
And also Thomas Hill said, good afternoon, all. I did like this episode a little more than last week's. I love the character Martok, and the Boimler story was so funny. Mariner and Ransom was okay, but weak. I do feel that both characters showed growth in this episode. So, Thomas, I'd be curious if you like the Leia Brahms cameo as much as the Martok. I think Martok might be my favorite. I'm just such a Klingon junkie, but the James Cromwell was a big one too. But yeah,
that's my favorite. Yeah, James Cromwell.
Maybe we'll get a new cameo next week in season 3, episode 4. But
who could it be? Guesses in the audience before.
See if anyone can guess it correctly.
We had a bunch of guesses earlier. Well, we had a bunch of wishful who
requests.
Who they'd requests. But I think we gotta. For guesses, I haven't seen they don't do little previews for the next episode, right? Like they do them later.
Right. I'm glad they don't, because it makes it easy to avoid spoilers, because I don't like to know anything until I actually watch it. I don't even know the name of next week's episode. I don't know jack shit about it. Wow. That's how I like to be. But whatever happens in it, we'll be talking about it. I know that thing. I know where you can find a deep dive discussion on it, and that's going to be Friday at 7 p.m. Central here on Tex-Trek. And you can also listen to the show wherever you get your podcast. And remember, we're doing a Patreon watch party on Saturday the 17th, so that's coming up very, very soon. But otherwise, check out the live show Friday, and until then,
Wait, before you go,
Oh,
I just
before
want
I
to say
before
I'm
we go.
totally with Jill. I would like a Tam Elbrum and Tin Man return on Lower Decks. That would be a really cool thing.
I have to think about who I want as my cameo. Maybe I'll have an answer next week. But until
Right
then,
on.
as always, live long and prosper, y'all.
Listen to the Tex-Trek podcast through Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or at tex-trek.com. Like us on Facebook at facebook.com/tex-trek, and follow Fathery on Twitter at txtrek. Please support us by liking our videos and subscribing to our channel on YouTube. Thank you and take care.